Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm very excited because this is going to be kind of like a two-part video, and it stems from the fact that one of my best friends texted me a week or two ago and was like, can you please recommend female horror authors to me because I cannot write any more male authors writing women badly, which, as many of you know, is kind of like a stereotype in like the horror community where there's so many authors from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and when they write women from a male gaze, they write things like the boobs boobily boobed. And so my friend was like tired of that, so she was like, please just send me female authors writing horror that I would like. And I want to share the list that I sent with you guys, but I also sent her a bunch of male authors that I actually do think write female characters in a more feminist, more strong, more realistic way. So I'm going to do a part 2 for this video that also features authors and their novels that are a little less boobily boobing, if that makes sense. Yeah, I'm really excited for this. These are mainly books that I sent her. Some of my recommendations to her were just female authors in general, where I like their entire body of work. And so I decided to actually just pick one of their books to highlight in this video for you guys. And I tried to pick a book that I haven't been highlighting as much frequently. So I do have an Anya Alborn novel on here. And while I did tell her to read, I told her to read like everything by Anya Alborn. But I normally talk about Brother and The Devil Crept In on this channel, and I'm actually going to be talking about a different book this time, which I'm very excited about. And I do that with all the other authors, but I just thought this would be a fun video to share. Also, let me know what you guys think of my lighting. I'm trying a different lighting rig today. It's very bright, so I'm probably blinking a lot. But I'm just trying to get like a good soft light in my studio that actually highlights my face and like what I'm talking about. That's very hard without having just like bright lights in my face. So I'm trying to find a rig that works. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of that. Anyway, let's dive into this video. So first up, the absolute first book that I recommended her was Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. I just finished this book. I couldn't put it down. She took my recommendation. She literally read it in one sitting. So I was like, oh man, okay, I have to talk about this book again. I'm going to keep it very short and very brief, but Catriona Ward writes these very twisty, turny, blindsided stories. A lot of times they're about kind of like the human condition, I would say. She's most well known for The Last House on Needless Street, which I think is fantastic, but I do think that this book is better. And I did just read it, and I do have a whole review deep dive on it, but I'm going to read the inside flap for you guys, just in case you didn't see those videos. In a cottage overlooking the windswept Maine coast, Wilder Harlow has begun the last book he will ever write. It is the story about the sun-drenched summer days of his youth in Whistler Bay and the blood-stained path of the killer that stalked his small vacation town. About the terrible secret he and his companions, Nat and Harper, discovered entombed in the coves off the bay, and how the pact they swore that day echoed down the decades, forever shaping their lives. But the more Wilder writes, the less he trusts himself in his memory. He starts to see things that can't be real, notes hidden in the cottage from an old friend now dead, a woman with dark hair drowning in the icy waters below, calling for help, entire chapters he doesn't recall typing, appearing overnight. Who or what is haunting Wilder? No longer able to trust his own eyes, Wilder begins to fear that this will not only be his last book, but the last thing he ever does. Looking Glass Sound is another masterful story from Catriona Ward about friendship and betrayal, dark obsessions, and the impossibility of escaping your own story. One of the things that I loved about this novel is the first 100 pages or so are some of the best chapters from a coming-of-age story that I think I've ever read in my entire life. It was just, the first 100 pages could be a novella all on their own, and I would buy that, and I would give it 5 stars, and I would recommend it to everybody. And then it kind of gets twisty-turny, like a book within a book kind of thing, and kind of making a critique on authorship in the literary community, and, who owns a story. Really interesting critique. It's very meta. It gets very House of Leavesy, in my personal opinion. But it is a really unique concept. It is a really original idea for a book, and I've never read anything like it, and I absolutely loved it. And Catriona's voice was amazing in this, and it just, I've read books that I didn't like from Catriona Ward before, and I've read books that I really enjoyed, but this book just put her in a whole new category for me, and now she is an instant buy author, and I want to read everything that she's going to put out forward, going forwards, if it's of the quality of this novel, because this one absolutely blew me away. Okay, next up. The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. I know people have a lot of opinions on T. Kingfisher, and people either love her or they hate her. I am kind of in the camp of, like, leaning towards loving her. I really didn't like What Moves the Dead, and I think that might be her most popular book, but I really loved A House with Good Bones. I enjoyed The Twisted Ones, but I think The Hollow Places is the best thing that she has ever written. If you've ever read The Willows by Algernon Blackwood, it is her, like, modern day reimagining of that story, and it's brilliant. And if you've read the original short story, you can really see where she got her imagery and ideas from, but this is very much its own unique original tale, paying homage to that story. And I think when she does a reimagining in modern day times of a horror classic, she's at her best, more so than when she's doing kind of her own original work or like a reinterpretation. I felt like What Moves the Dead was very much just a reinterpretation of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, but it wasn't truly a reimagining, and I think this is where she shines completely. I'm going to read the back of the book for you guys. Newly divorced and living back at home in rural North Carolina, Kara is helping out her ailing eccentric Uncle Earl at his house, which doubles as a tourist hotspot, the Glory to God Museum of Natural Wonders, Curiosities, and Taxidermy. While Kara is closing up one night, she discovers a mysterious hole in the drywall along one of the museum's overstuffed hallways of oddities. An opening that impossibly leads Kara and her new friend Simon to a sprawling area that simply can't be part of North Carolina's plane of existence. As they explore the apparently limitless depths of this bizarre and frightening new world, a hub containing portals to alternate realities, and bear witness to its cryptic warnings, they can hear you thinking and pray they are hungry. Kara and Simon soon realize there is far more danger here than first anticipated, for they have stumbled upon a place of unyielding madness and terror, haunted by abysmal creatures that gather strength from one's innate fear of them. This book has body horror. This book has, I guess, kind of cosmic horror. It has such a well-done, creepy atmosphere and just really fun, spunky, over-the-top characters, and I devoured this book. This is the first thing I ever read from T. Kingfisher, and I remember just being like, how have I not heard of this author before? And she has this amazing kind of colloquial voice that she uses in all of her novels, and I absolutely love it. I think it translates so well to the page. I always feel like a best friend is telling me the story, and she's got such a like incredible fun voice, and it's so unliterary, and yet I devour it. And it really sets her apart in my mind. I really love the tone of voice that she uses in her stories, and I know some people don't love that, but I love it, and I think it's just fantastic, and she's such a fun author, and The Hollow Places is the best thing she's written in my opinion. Okay, speaking of colloquial voices, Rachel Harrison. Ooh, it was really hard for me to pick which Rachel Harrison book I was going to feature for this. Rachel Harrison is like the voice of the millennial woman of horror. I think she just writes for the millennial woman. Every time I read her stories, I know her characters. I know who Rachel Harrison is. I can relate on so many levels, but I hate all of her characters. All of her characters are just such despicable, selfish people. And a lot of her characters in general are just awful, awful, awful people. But her tone of voice is so fun and so relatable, and the situations she creates for her characters are so engaging and, again, so rooted in reality, even when we're talking about, like, cosmic entities and magical creatures and, like, horrifying beings, that I'm just like, I need to read everything Rachel Harrison writes. She's one of those authors that, like, I don't think I actually like any of her ideas and concepts, but yet I love her writing, and I'm going to read everything she writes. She's the only author that I really have this weird love-hate relationship with, where at the end of the day, I'm just like, I am such a Rachel Harrison fangirl, because I just love how she writes. Even if I don't love the character she's writing, or some of the plots that she creates. But I do think that Black Sheep might be my favorite. This one definitely had like the craziest twist that I've ever seen in a book, and I didn't see it coming, and when it happened, I was like, oh my god, it's so good. And it's so funny. And just the whole critique on like religion and cults in this book is so cheeky, and I love it. Let me read the inside flap. Nobody has a normal family, but Vesper Wrights is truly something else. Vesper left home at 18 and never looked back, mostly because she was told that leaving the staunchly religious community she grew up in meant she couldn't return. But then, an envelope arrives on her doorstep. Inside is an invitation to the wedding of Vesper's beloved cousin Rosie. It's to be hosted at the family farm. Have they made an exception to the rule? It wouldn't be the first time Vesper has been given special treatment. Is the invite a sweet gesture? An olive branch? A trap? Doesn't matter. Something inside her insists she go to the wedding, even if it means returning to the toxic environment she escaped. Even if it means reuniting with her mother Constance, a former horror film star and forever ice queen. When Vesper's homecoming exhumes a terrifying secret, she's forced to reckon with her family's belief and her own crisis of faith in the deliciously sinister novel that explores the way family ties can bind us as we struggle to find our place in the world. If you're a fan of like horror movie memorabilia and like paying homage to like the slashers of the 70s and 80s, this has so many like little like gems into that fandom. Not necessarily like the actual icons of the 70s and 80s, but like just like what fans love about those fandoms. There's a lot of that in this book. This book is so funny. It is so dark. It is so whimsical. It is so over the top. And even though I hate every single character in this book, I love this book. And Rachel Harrison is like one of the only authors that I think can do that. And she's just such a strong, powerful female voice. And it is such a like joy reading her work, even when I get angry at like 90% of her characters. Okay, next up. Talked about this book a lot on my channel recently. And this is The September House by Carissa Orlando. This to me is one of the most like feminist books I have read in a really long time. And I just read Sugarcane by Cassandra Celia, and I debated putting that on this list, but I do think that that book really, you need to know what you're getting into to really understand a lot of the messaging in that book, and it is a little bit more on the borderline of extreme horror. But this, I think, is a really strong debut novel, very much showcasing very pro-feminist values and creating a very, very strong female lead from an extremely unlikely character. This book blew me away. I wasn't really sure where it was going at first, and then once I really started to unravel the actual message of this book, I began to love it even more. And every time I look back on this novel, it's just such like a shining beacon of pro-feminist values, and I absolutely adore it. I'm going to read the inside flap. When Margaret and her husband Hal bought the large Victorian house on Hawthorne Street, for sale at a surprisingly reasonable price, they couldn't believe they finally had a home of their own. Then, they discovered the hauntings. Every September, the walls drip blood. The ghosts of former inhabitants appear, and all of them are terrified of something that lurks in the basement. Most people would flee. Margaret is not most people. After 4 years, Margaret has learned how to live with the house. It's her house, after all. But Hal can't take it anymore, and he leaves abruptly. Now, he's not returning calls, and their daughter Catherine, who knows nothing about the hauntings, arrives, intent on looking for her missing father. To make things worse, September has just begun. And with every attempt Margaret and Catherine make to find Hal, the hauntings grow more harrowing, because there are some secrets the house needs to keep. Oh my goodness. This book has so much humor in it, while dealing with a very, very, very dark topic. It's going to talk a lot about domestic violence, and that is just something that you should be aware of going into this book as a large trigger warning. I think it handles it beautifully. I think this creates such a strong, centered message, and I absolutely adored this book. Oh my goodness, I adored this book. I was blown away by just the craftsmanship that went into creating the message that Carissa Orlando is trying to send with this book, and how it's really well masked for the first half of the book, and then when you get to the second and really start to dig through the messaging, you really get hit with exactly what Carissa Orlando wants the reader to take away from this book without kind of feeling like you're just having it shoved in your face. Like, it's a really nice, like, oh, I see the message of this book, and it kind of unravels along with the story without you just kind of feeling like, oh, this is just another, like, it's showing the message on a billboard and telling me exactly what I need to know. It is the perfect show, don't tell book. It really, really is. And I just, this is such a fun read. And I was not expecting to be so blown away by an author I had never heard of before. Okay. I had to include my Anya Allborn. I love her. Oh my gosh, she's like the queen of horror in this house. I think her books are fantastic. They are gruesome. They are depraved. She primarily focuses on horror of the family unit. That is where she draws most of her inspiration from, and she is a master at it. Dark Across the Bay, while not my favorite of her books, it is definitely one of my most recommended. It is gruesome. It is dark. There's not really that much of a happy ending, but I think it's really well crafted, and I think it does a really good job of showcasing the type of horror and extreme that Anya Allborn will take the reader to. Read the back. The house sits stoic and slightly askew off the coast of Ravenshead. Its off-kilter windows are both charming and disorienting. Its walls of overstuffed bookshelves both comforting and claustrophobic. When Leo and Lark Parrish arrive at their vacation home with their parents, their mother's idea of a quintessential Maine getaway seems like both a blessing and a curse. Lark, a novice novelist, can't wait to find inspiration at the end of a fog-entombed pier. She'll forgive her mother for forcing her into the non-negotiable holiday, but only if she can find her muse along a lapping rocky shore. And while being trapped in a house with no means of escape is the last thing Leo would consider a good time, especially with parents on the precipice of divorce, he can't help but wonder if maybe the change of scenery will help him shake off the chains of sadness brought on by the death of his closest friend. But what starts off as a relatively benign family trip quickly turns menacing. Leo finds himself face to face with what feels like his best friend reaching out from beyond the grave. And only hours after they arrive, Lark begins to receive sinister texts, and then they both see it. Someone lurking in the shadows of their rental home. Someone who has been expecting them, despite the Parrishes being 1,000 miles from home. I thought this was going to be a great summer read, except I'm pretty sure it takes place at the very beginning of autumn. But regardless, it's still kind of set on like a little island on the like the outer shores of Maine. This is dark, this is depraved, and I devoured this book. It's like this really like entangled mystery, and it really focuses on the entanglement of the family unit and how certain decisions can really change someone's lives, but not just like your life, but the people that you love and care about the most. And I really loved this. This was like a limited release from Anya Allborn that then got a larger extended release, and I'm really, really happy that it did, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have picked it up, to be honest, because it was in such a small release to begin with. But I loved it. I was so blown away with the writing. And again, it's very, very dark. It's one of the more extreme books that I have on this list. You don't really feel good after reading an Anya Allborn book, but she has such a great way of making horror rooted in reality, something that could happen to anybody. These books aren't supernatural. Well, many of her books are, but this one isn't. And that's what I love about this, is that this is one of the scariest concepts I have read from her, and it's because it is so rooted in things that could actually take place in reality. There is nothing supernatural that sets all of the events in motion with the story, and it's beautifully well done and beautifully crafted book. Okay, next up, Laurel Hightower. Laurel Hightower is becoming one of these authors that, like, every time I read one of her stories, I'm just like, I want more from you, I want more from you, I want more from you. But this is the book that really brought me to Laurel Hightower, and it's the book that I still want the most from, because it is her cryptid novella. It's called Below. It's set in West Virginia. It's primarily focusing on Mothman. And it's just a very, very creepy, atmospheric read. Focusing not only on Mothman, but many other cryptids that could be in West Virginia. And it is just such a blast to read the story. I'm going to read the back. While driving through the mountains of West Virginia during a late-night snowstorm, a recently divorced woman experiences bizarre electrical problems, leaving her with little choice but to place her trust with a charismatic truck driver. But when an unexplainable creature with haunting red eyes gets between them, she is forced to make one of the toughest decisions of her life. Will she abandon the stranger who kept her safe, or will she climb down below, where reality has shapeshifted into a living nightmare? I am determined to read a Laurel Hightower book that is a 5 out of 5 stars. She is always right on a 4-star read for me, because I'm always just like, I need more of your amazing imagination. I need more of your atmosphere. I need more of your concepts of the supernatural and ghost. And I really do enjoy her stuff, and I always want to recommend her stuff. but I am just determined to keep reading her until I get like just a perfect novel from her, because she is so close for me, just so close to like being one of those authors that I'm like instant buy every time, because her concepts are unique, they're fun, they take things that like horror readers love and fads and trends, she flips them on their head and makes a cool unique style out of them, and I really appreciate that with her. But this is definitely my favorite thing because I love Mothman and the cover is so cool. Okay, so there was like no way I could do this video and not include Darcy Coates. As many of you guys know, Darcy Coates is one of my favorite authors. She is our queen of cozy horror, which means 9 out of 10 times this is going to be a nice palate cleanser book. It's not going to be like crazy body horror. It's not going to be crazy disturbing. Yes, she does have some very scary scenes. Yes, sometimes she does go into body horror. Yes, she has written very frightening, unsettling stories before, and they don't always have happy endings. Like, she's getting more and more brutal as her career is going on. But this is one of my favorite books from her. It's up there with like The Haunting of Ashburn House and The Fallcroft Ghost of like my favorite things that she's ever written, but I feel like I don't talk about it as much as the others. So I'm going to read the back real quick. Remy is a tour guide for the notoriously haunted Caro House. When she's asked to host guests for a week-long stay in order to search Caro's phenomenon, she hopes to finally experience some of the sightings that made the house famous. At first, it's everything they hoped for. Then a storm moves in, cutting off their contact with the outside world, and things quickly take a sinister turn. Doors open on their own. Seances go disastrously wrong. Their spirit medium wanders through the house at night, seemingly in a trance. But it isn't until one of the guests dies under strange circumstances that Remy is forced to consider the possibility that the ghost of the house's original owner, a twisted serial killer, still walks the halls. This book reminded me a lot of like learning about the case of H.H. Holmes. And it also reminded me a lot of like the classic haunted house narratives, primarily like Shirley Jackson's Haunting of Hill House, which I feel like is a lot of what Darcy Coates took inspiration from when creating this. It isn't quite kind of her typical formula of like a main character with like a couple of like friends helping her solve like kind of a ghosty mishap. It's a whole cast and crew of characters, and it's something that we don't see too often from Darcy Coates. We're seeing it more frequently. Like, I feel like From Below and Dead of Winter really kind of touch on that kind of concept, but this is my favorite one of her stories, having a large cast of characters, and I really like the idea of it still kind of having those cozy elements, but kind of pushing the boundaries for Coates more so than we would normally see. Still cute, still cozy at the end. Definitely had some really, really frightening imagery, but it's one of her longer books too. It's like almost 400 pages, but definitely worth the read. Definitely one of my favorite things that I've ever read from her, and I definitely read it in like 3 days, I think. I had a really hard time putting this one down. It was just so fast-paced, and I loved trying to unsolve the like clue-like mystery, and had a blast with this one. All right, we got 2 more, y'all. C.J. Tudor's The Drift. C.J. Tudor is definitely kind of a divisive author. I know that people tend to love her or hate her. They think that she takes a lot of things too far. And in this book, yeah, she's got a scene or two where she definitely, in my opinion, takes things too far. And The Chalk Man, the same. But I do really like her. And I do think that she is a very strong voice, leaning more into, I would say, slightly extreme horror, but still kind of staying in more what I would call like the Stephen King realm. She definitely writes these like very King, Ronald Malfi-esque narratives, where it's never too high of a concept. It's still pretty much kind of rooted in reality. They're pretty like quintessential storylines and cliches that she takes and expands upon, and I really enjoy her writing for that. The Drift, though, I think is the best thing that she has ever written, and it is 3 stories in one, and the entire novel is based on you trying to figure out how everything connects. And I was not quite able to figure out exactly how everything connects, and when everything was like starting to fall into place, I was like, oh my god, never in a million years that I would think that that is what this book is about. So kudos to her for that, because that I thought was a brilliant way to do this story. I'm gonna read the inside flap. Hannah awakens to carnage, all mangled metal and shattered glass. After she was evacuated from a secluded boarding school during a snowstorm, her coach careered off the road, trapping her with a handful of survivors. They'll need to work together to escape, with their sanity and secrets intact. Meg awakens to a gentle rocking. She's in a cable car stranded high above snowy mountains, with 5 strangers and no memory of how they got on board. They are heading to a place known only as the Retreat. But as the temperature drops and tensions mount, Meg realizes they may not all make it there alive. Carter is gazing out the window of an isolated ski chalet he and his companions call home. As their generator begins to waver in the storm, something hiding in the chalet's depths threatens to escape, and their fragile bonds will be tested when the power finally fails for good. The imminent dangers faced by Hannah, Meg, and Carter are each one part of the puzzle. Lurking in their shadows is an even greater danger, one with the power to consume all of humanity. This book is great. I'm a little shocked that it came out right at like the tail end of the pandemic, because that is kind of the crux of what the story focuses on. However, I think it does a really cool way of looking at the beginning of a worldwide pandemic, because it just does it in such a non-Hollywood way. Like, I feel like we look at things like 28 Days Later and The Walking Dead and like all those zombie movies, and obviously those are absolute classics. The Stand even. But you're kind of really focusing on the characters like surviving because of the disease. This one really is just a focus on like the characters dealing with the fact that the disease is there. And I know that that sounds very, very similar to what I just said, but I promise it's vastly different. And the kind of like character concern in the story, I think, is just brilliant. And it doesn't highlight like zombies or like a rage virus as like the real threat in this book. A lot of the threat in this book is like the government and the elements. And I just loved the setting of this. It's very wintry. Maybe don't read it in the summer unless like you kind of want to feel cold again. But I was blown away by this, and I thought CJ Tudor did an amazing job, and the twist I thought was just top tier and fantastic. Okay, and last but not least, I know I've talked about this a lot on my channel recently, but we're going to talk about Legacy Witches one more time, real quick. Just because I think Cast K needs to be talked about more. So this is Legacy Witches. This gives me Chilling Adventures of Sabrina vibes. And it's like making up for the fact that that TV show was no longer on for me, and I'm like very, very happy about it. It is a witch story set in Salem with a really cool world of witches, and the world building that Cast K has done, I think, is absolutely superb. It does a really good, it's a very good way to blend a fictional Salem with the real Salem, and I feel like I've never really seen that done well before. Because I go to Salem quite a lot, and you can tell that Cast K does too, because I can really see the town layout of Salem and the way the town functions and how it's kind of like this port town as well, and it's not just about witches over there, and I just love how she has created this. And while it does kind of have this like CWYA tone to it, it's still very adult in my mind, and that is where I greatly, greatly enjoy this. So I'm going to read the inside flap. Seeing ghosts and coming from a long line of murderous witches has made life less than sunshine and rainbows for Vianna Roots. When she inherits the family's haunted house, she decides flipping the rundown dump for cash is the smartest move. But the ghosts that haunt her have a different plan. After encountering the spirit of a missing local witch, Vianna finds herself drawn into the mystery of who murdered the girl, and her meddling draws the attention of the oldest coven in Salem. When they make an offer on her house, Vianna hesitates, cutting ties with the demon who possesses her home, and the transgender outcast witch, who may just be the best friend she never knew she wanted, isn't so simple. The tainted legacy of the witches before her was why she ran 10 years ago, but this time Vianna is ready to prove that the past doesn't define her. This is probably the least, horror book that I have on this list, but I do think that it is an amazing palate cleanser, and it is the witchiest book that I have on this list. And just kind of the world of witchcraft inside of this novel, I just think is so fun and so unique, and I just want more of it. And it is a series, so if you enjoy it, you can keep reading. Book 2 I thought was great. It's called Forgotten Ghosts. But she's just an author that I feel like more people need to be talking about. And her voice is fun, her stories are creative, and I really, really love her characters, especially Dee. Dee is such a fun and charming character. And it's just definitely the type of story I want to read, especially if I'm reading a lot of these more heavy, intense books like CJ Tudor and Anya Alborn. You need like a Cast K and a Darcy Coates to kind of break up the morbidity or morbidness. I don't know. Anyways, so those are I think I have 9 books by female horror authors that I love recommending to people. All of these female authors are such great voices. And I'm actually going to be starting the Reformatory by, I'm going to say this so wrong, Tananarive Due. I'm so sorry. I think I said that horribly wrong. I have heard amazing things about her. I've seen her talk, he was on Eli Roth's History of Horror a bunch, and she is so well educated and insightful, and I'm so excited for this novel. It's like 600 pages. I'm doing a buddy read with my friend who I actually made this list for, so very excited for that. But I'm so excited to finally dive into this novel and to finally dive into Du's work, because I have heard so many amazing things from her, and I love all of her commentary and horror documentaries. She is so intelligent and insightful, and I'm so excited. But because I've never read any of her stuff before, I can't put her on this list, but I want you guys to know that I am reading her work, and I am very excited to do so. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays, and if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah!